We're joined on the line now by Meath's Jenny Rispin to talk about Eamonn Murray's amazing legacy following his a bit of a surprise departure really as the Meath women's football manager. Jenny, good morning to you. How are you getting on?
All good. How are you getting on?
When did you guys find out about this?
Yeah, I suppose the news broke over the weekend. There was, I suppose, rumblings over the last few weeks, will he or won't he? I suppose especially since the news of Paul Garrigan and his team moving on as well. So there was a lot of questions in the air. Probably need to be stifled either way, but so look, it's shook Meath ladies football over the weekend. But look, for some it's not too surprising, and for others, probably comes as a bit of a shock from outside the county.
He'd signalled it a little bit in the build-up, and certainly had spoken about how this was the end of this backroom team in particular, because we kind of knew that some members were stepping away, and obviously with some of the team heading down to Australia, there was a sense that this was definitely going to be the end of an era. But given how central he'd been to the whole thing, there was maybe a hope that he might have stayed on to try and oversee the rebuilding.
Yeah, it almost feels strange to say it's an end of an era, and in some ways you feel like things are only kicking off. So it feels unusual to say that, but at the same time, yeah, if you're on the inside, you'll see that it's been a long journey. Yeah, I'd say maybe Eamonn had hoped to stay on. I mean, look, he's a passionate Meath football man, and he wouldn't want to have moved on, unless the things weren't right around him, and he'd want to build a team that would move, would get Meath ladies forward again in the future. So look, I'd say that things I'm sure he's been thinking about a long time, and so maybe he just didn't get the things fall into place around him.
Like it's mad. Like just in Dublin and Meath, like what are we talking, like literally about a year ago, give or take, Dublin and Meath, and that's when he exploded onto the national scene in terms of where this Meath team was. And it's actually just come and gone just like that. 2 wins, bang bang, and like that's what it feels like from the outside looking in.
Yeah, it's true. Like that's what I'm saying, in the space of a year. It was only last September. It's only
11 months ago, basically, give or take. Like,
sorry,
it's literally like not even a year ago when that when the expectation was Dublin were going to win that game. Now all of a sudden, Meath are like one of the best teams you've ever seen, and he's gone.
That's it. It's literally been a whirlwind year. Meath were outsiders that time. If they'd lost that final, you'd wonder what would have happened. It could have been a very different face of ladies football across the country. But Meath didn't. Meath won that year, and in the space of a year, winning 2 All-Irelands back to back. National League, Eamonn Murray, and all these Meath ladies players are on everyone's lips. And all of a sudden, just like that, for on the face of it, that he's moving on. But as I said, look, this is a long process for Eamonn. So that even going back over the years, he's a long time with the underage setup. And look, when players start stepping away, and Eamonn, Paul Garrigan would have meant a lot to him as well, and Paul's a long time on the road with him there. And I'm sure that when Paul decided to step away, that maybe it was time for Eamonn to step away too. Where do you start rebuilding this Meath team? Getting people around you at the top, the start of all, but also going on the hunt for new players as well.
That's the thing though. It's very, very difficult when you look at the players you're losing, and to for the players to maintain that commitment. As much as it's this Meath thing is so fresh and so young. For the inter-county commitment is so insane to maintain that hunger. Is it a question of, right, I'm going out at the top here, it doesn't get better than this, or is it just like this is too much of an effort to go back in another year and almost start a little bit afresh?
Yeah, there's probably a bit of both. As I said, there's a lot of girls as well with a lot of miles in their legs as well. That are looking for a change, but there's a lot of young players biting to get onto that team, and I've no doubt that Eamonn, he would stick it out if he thought things were right. But look, Eamonn, it's probably right that to pass it on to somebody else. It's probably the right time. You kind of have. It'd be hard for somebody to come in as a new coach under Eamonn to try and build off what's already been done. And, at the same time, there's no doubting Eamonn as a manager, everything else has to be right around it. And I would find it possibly quite hard to do that.
So do you think there was anything that the county board could have done to convince him to stay?
Look, Eamonn is his own man. He makes up his mind to do something and he'll do it. You know, he needed convincing to do it in the first place. You know, I was surprised he kind of took on an adult role or senior team, especially at the time 5 years ago. But you know, thinking back, he was the only man for the job. But so I suppose, you know, when you have to respect his wishes, and I said everything has to be right around him, and you know, there's probably an element of going on his own terms as well is important for any manager. Maybe there's a point of out at the top now and hand it over to somebody else when it's in such a good place.
What is the scene like in terms of the next crop of players who might be able to replace the players who've gone off to the AFLW?
Yeah, I think there's, you know, look, Meath have never been short of good footballers before, and probably the hardest thing in the past is probably convincing them to give that commitment, and you know that there's hope of something at the end of it. So I think that's you know, the hard part done now for a lot of players. Is you know, the beauty of what's gone on the last few years is probably having an extended training panel, and you know there's been work being done in the background there with that, and I'm sure there's a lot of players ready to step up. You know, that probably haven't got as much game time as they'd like. You know, there's a very settled team there the last couple of years. But look, I've known a few players in the background there, and so been involved with the minor team this year. There is plenty of talent coming through. So, you know, and Eamonn would know that, and any manager coming in would know that, and that there's that talent will be worked with there. And you know, to throw in there that there's still a lot of faces there left from last year's team.
Yeah, who now have the experience of coming up and winning multiple All-Irelands at the different levels. So they'll be a seasoned team, and if you can just add in a little bit of extra, then there's no doubt that they're going to be competitive next year. Have you seen a specific increase in the number of kids playing as a result of the success of the county team?
Oh, absolutely, no doubt. I think our registration numbers in the ladies' side have gone through the roof. But I would even say, like, I work with the GA here in Meath and in coaching in games, and it has just given everything such a lift. It certainly makes our job easier when there's such an interest in ladies' football from both sides, you know, male and female. And you know, I mean, the Brendan Martin Cup is already doing the rounds around the county. You know, any opportunity to promote it has been used as well by clubs, you know, either side of it. So yeah, there's definitely, you know, and it's even more visual than before. You know, like, you know, the key pack, when we see the key pack jersey is, you know, so flying out the shops, you can see every kid going around with the Meath jerseys on.
Bit of nostalgia in that as well, like.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, so we all, like, growing up in Meath, you know, it was a treasured item. It was a Meath key pack jersey, and you know, you're back to those days now, and it's, you know, so refreshing to see. It really does mean a lot as anyone in the GA that kids are going around and showing off their jersey with pride, whether it's male or female. And I think that's, you know, as a visual, it's massive for the gaming year.
I had the joy or otherwise of watching the odd Galway Roscommon hurling game in that league opposite the Keypack factory, and I tell you, that was an absolute experience now of watching a hurling game in those circumstances. One thing that Eamonn said though, Jenny, and Vicky Wall disagreed with it clearly after the final against Kerry. I totally disagreed with them, and I don't know, like, did this open up a debate in the games about the physicality and the refereeing and that? Because Eamonn's point, maybe he's kind of looking at it from the side of the men's game, which is kind of, I don't know, it has its issues. But the physicality thing for me, Vicky's obviously been an exponent of that side of the game. It's made it far better. I think the players themselves want a more kind of liberal interpretation of the rules, but Eamonn seems to be of the more sort of traditional mindset. No, that'll ruin the game, and it'll maybe stop parents from getting their kids to play. What's the narrative around that now?
Yeah, I think the issue, well, look, first of all, there's more and more people watching the game now and having opinions on it, which is probably a lot of what's coming from. There's obviously more spotlight on it as well. I wouldn't say the rules have changed massively, but probably the interpretation of it. And I just say, yeah, the conditioning of players now, you know, so it's bringing all that into question. I'd probably be leaning towards Eamonn's side. I don't see a need to open up the rules to allow more physicality. I think it's the interpretation and the use of it by probably referees that needs to be just looked at. And you know, there's just this grey area of, I think there'll be, you know, so the charge and interpretation of that rule. So I think, you know, and not to put the pressure on the referees maybe need to have a discussion with the top table as to how they're going to interpret the rules rather than changing the rules to allow more physicality. I don't think there's a need for it. I think, we have a great game as it is. And, there is an element of, we have to protect players as well. That, there's variations in size and ability and conditioning as well, even down to grassroots level. So
sorry. Yeah, I might have kind of explained myself slightly wrong there. So do you think maybe if the referees sort of they just get together and kind of come up with something of this is the Bible that we work off here in terms of this is how we try to implement the rules as opposed to kind of change the rules effectively?
Possibly, yeah. Look, I said I'm not inside of that side of things, but I know they would get some guidance as to how to interpret the rules. So, I would imagine, so that they'd have a common language that they want to use as well. Because look, you see the start of every year, you'll have a referee maybe coming in to talk to teams and explain if there is any issues that they'll be focusing on, and any things that they'll be looking out for, and how they will interpret, and how they will referee the game. So you will have that aspect from certain referees, at the start of the game or before the game starts. So, look, I know there's a lot of discussion around it. When you look at Vicky, it'll be interesting to see how she gets on in Australia. But look, for me personally, I think, the rules are fine, but it's how they're interpreted. And look, there's a lot of snapshots there, but referee has to make a split decision, and it doesn't look good on the replay. But for me, I'd be more leaning towards Eamonn's ideas.
I have one last question for you, Jenny. Vicky Wall is arguably the biggest star who has gone as a senior to Australia. You could argue that some of the young males who went over were very heralded, and obviously the David Clifford had been talked about. But what happened when David Clifford was talked about was that the Kerry County Board put together a package that they literally produced a document that was to try and entice their young players to stay. Did the GAA community in Ireland do enough to make sure that Vicky Wall, like the most marketable star in women's football, wasn't allowed to go to Australia? Because apparently she's had a great start, and that aggressive side to her game, which she really loves, is something that they're like, oh yeah, we love this, Like, did we miss a trick there?
Look, I'm going to be honest, somebody trying to promote the GAA here, and particularly ladies football, it's devastating to see it from that point of view that, our biggest stars, the game is really at a peak audience now in terms of marketing and viewership and people interested in the game. Whereas you look in Australia, it's still very much in its infancy and starting out. Was there enough done? There can never be enough. You need to. I think the GA as a whole need to look at it, and particularly LGFA. Vicky did, it's the top of her game, most talked about player in Ireland. Possibly could have, but
what do you do?
That's it. Like, what do you do?
What did Kerry do? They put together a package. Kerry put together a package that obviously were like, if you stay here, we'll be able to help you with your education. We'll be able to help you with other stuff. Like, there's enough corporations who are interested and who benefit from the women's game having a superstar in it. I just think that we should be having an honest conversation about this. There needs to be some financial imperative for people to stay to play the women's game in particular, because it's so important now that it reaches a level that it continues to grow. You're seeing it in knock-on numbers in both the men's and women's sport. It's like a massive shop window. They could also push the women's game back to be the only inter-county game in August and September, and what a shop window that'd be. Everybody's crying out for inter-county games to go to. Like, I just feel like that's grand. The money that they're getting in Australia is not huge. Like, it's not.
There is the Australian appeal, obviously, as well.
Yeah, sure, the lifestyle thing.
Enough.
But Ireland's not bad. I don't know. What do you think, Jenny?
I completely agree. I think we do need to do something more to keep our star players here. As I said, so much has gone into promoting LGFA, and then we've obviously the GPA as well, getting on board and trying to give a bit more to our players and to add that little bit extra. But look, again, I don't know, because there is that kind of appeal of Australia at the other side of the world, and this whole experience that you're not going to get here. And
I get that, but that wasn't enough to get Clifford. The women's Clifford has gone.
It's also true. Like we spoke about like Lidl and its involvement in Sky. Like Vicky Wall, just for argument's sake, Vicky Wall is worth an awful lot as a marketing tool, massively. Like it's an iconic image. It's like, this is where the game is going. Everyone can relate to her, whether you even watch it or not, and it's gone.
Yeah, like it's incredible. Like I think I've seen even the milk carton there with Vicky on it. Like it's actually unbelievable, the appeal she has. So I don't know. Listen, is there somebody out there that can put a package together for these players? I think it's something the LGFA will need to really look at in the next couple of years, and the GPA. They can't continue to hemorrhage players like they have done. You know, really probably at our peak appeal for the game. You know, where we've broken all the attendance records, viewership records. You're looking at it all now, and you're really at the top of it. And I think, you know, like someone like Vicky, you know, and there's more to it than that. It's more than Vicky, but yeah, no, I completely agree. I don't know. I think they might need to bring a few, you know, partnerships together and sit down and trash it out. Maybe look at what Kerry have done. So I'm not kind of really familiar what they've put together, but look, I know there's it's still very early days. I know it's been, you know, ladies football has been thrust into the spotlight in the last couple of years, but we're still, you know, off the pace of where the men are at. And I think, you know, the LGFA are doing a lot of work to get us up there.